I included the others that you mentioned. But as you know, my materials, all my books have been pirated and put on the internet. And someone who pirated it, in his version, he put in Disney as, but okay. I put that in.
Okay, yeah. Well, okay. Then with the exception of Disney, right, the Rothschilds and the Rockefeller. Okay, right. and this, of course, the Illuminati really was birthed in the modern day, or in the more recent times, if you want to call it that, in 1776.
That was the Bavarian Illuminati that you're talking about, and what I have been trying to do to clarify to people is that the bloodlines that I'm talking about, these powerful bloodlines, they created a branch. You know, if you have a bank, you know, that your bank or your library has different branches to it. And the Bavarian Illuminati was a branch that they created, but the Illuminati I'm talking about goes way further back, and so I don't want to confuse the issues so that people think that the Bavarian Illuminati is the Illuminati. They're just a branch. And then a branch of that branch, I guess you could call it a twig, is the Order of the Skull and Bone, which both of our President Bushes were members of, and a lot of people in government have been members of that. That's just a branch of the Bavarian Illuminati, which is a branch of the larger secret society of the Illuminati.
Okay. Well, that's important then for me, or for that distinction is extremely important. Perhaps you can just take us then through what we need to know in terms of, well, modern day Illuminati, or start at a place, Fritz, that you think an educated or pretty educated audience up to speed should know about the Illuminati and about even present day events. I mean, go ahead, and I'm going to allow you just to pick a starting point and take it from there.
Well, there's two different ways I want to approach this, and the first way is to approach it from the corporations, because so many people now are aware of the power of the corporations. You know, how the corporations donate money to the politicians, and the corporations are doing this and that. And recently, like a year or two ago, I got a book by Greenpeace, and they were documenting how the corporations control California, which they did in their book very well. But what I'm doing is I'm taking it a step further and saying, who are the directors, the CEOs, the chairman of the board? Who are the stockholders with the controlling stock? Who are these people of the interlocking directorates of these corporations? Who are they? And when you go to investigate them, you'll see that there are these bloodlines that we've been talking about. There are these Illuminati bloodlines. And so that's the level above the corporations, are these powerful Illuminati kingpins. That's one way to look at it. Another way that I want to bring the listener in is there's a lot of fraternal organizations that have been created. And these fraternal organizations, like the Order of the Skull and Bones, which is just one fraternal organization. There are many other chapters of the Illuminati out there, but just looking at that one for the moment, there were some college students, some boys that, and I can just imagine them talking themselves into doing this wild-haired scheme. But they broke into the tomb, which is the building of the Order of the Skull and Bones, and they went into a room where they saw something written on the wall in German, which they copied down, but it didn't mean anything to them. But long story short, we know because there was a man, James Robertson, who was a very highly respected professor of natural philosophy, and he was a scientist, a Scotsman, and he wrote Proofs of a Conspiracy back around the American Revolution, that time period, because he had been a high-ranking Freemason when the Bavarian Illuminati had come in and illuminized the Masonic lodges, and he had not wanted to become part of the Illuminati program, so he exposed them. And he happened to give just as a tidbit in this book, Proofs of a Conspiracy, he gave the Order of the Regent, which is a level within the Bavarian Illuminati, he gave the ritual for that. And it turns out that the words that were in German that were were on the wall in the tomb were those ritual words. In other words, we've got physical evidence that the Order of the Skull and Bones is a chapter of the Illuminati. And there are other chapters, Berzelius, Book and Snake. There's other chapters, and I give some of these other chapters of the Illuminati in my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book. So we've got many organizations that connect in with them, and in fact, they use a lot of organizations as covers and fronts. And for our listeners out there, if they're familiar with the way intelligence agencies work through, including how communism worked, back during the Cold War, how they would create fronts and fronts of fronts, and the Illuminati does the same thing because they are so secret that essentially in the real world they don't exist. It's like in order for them to function, they function through these front organizations.
I see. Okay. And again, this might sound academic to you and to our listeners, but again, to the new listeners, and even when I first started my quest on this, when I ran into the word Illuminati, and of course, as you mentioned, Skull and Bones, all these other organizations, one of the initial questions I had from an investigative point of view is, why should I care about, for example, about the Illuminati and what they think, and ultimately, what's their objective? Those were two questions that I kind of had to wrestle with initially. How would you respond to that?
Well, if you look at the way the world is going and the enormous problems that humankind is facing, for instance, what they've done to the oceans, vast areas of the oceans are dead now. And it's a question whether any life will survive in the oceans. They sent these huge trawlers out, and as they would go through the ocean, they would scoop up all life within an area and just kill it all. And then they replaced that with agriculture. They started farming fish and shellfish, and they told us that was the answer. But the way they're doing that is they're creating fish that are highly toxic to us. The point I'm making is there's an enormous problem there, right? We're facing genocide. We're facing potentially another third world war. I could go down the list, and if I had the time, which maybe we'll take the time, I don't know. Maybe it's not important, but there's a direct link with all these problems back to the Illuminati agenda, And our U.S. government, a lot of people that are listeners may be aware that they're legally committed to genocide, to taking the world's population drastically down, And so if we look at what's happening around the world, we actually see policies of genocide. And so we're staring the destruction of the human race in the face. That should concern people.
So the Illuminati, really, when we talk about the globalists and the global elite, you're talking about the Illuminati as the umbrella of the global elite, and these are the people who want to set policy to control. They're the power behind the faces that we see on TV. They're the power behind the politicians. It's those people who are they want population reduction. They want all of these insane things, and they have set about to implement their agenda and essentially kill us or enslave us. So that's why it's important. Okay, all right. Yeah. And again, folks, I just want, and I know a lot of people are saying, rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, come on, we've gone over this." But for the new people, just because when I first got into this, I thought, well, why is it important? And Fritz just explained that. So, well, you take it now. You go ahead and take us in any direction that you feel comfortable in taking it with respect to the Illuminati. Maybe if you want to talk about where we are today, the current agenda, whatever. Just enlighten us on what you, Fritz Springmeier, feels is important to discuss that people should know that maybe they don't know, or they don't know the whole truth.
Wow.
We're going to give you the floor here, and because we want to hear what you've got to say about the Illuminati, your research, your findings. things, and even, I mean, you could take us anywhere you want to go because I know that on your website, and folks, Fritz's website is pentracks.com, pentracks.com. Bookmark that website. Take a look at it. But you've got on your website some pretty interesting stuff. Links between Sandy Hook and the occult. Obviously, we electronically harassed. We had Dr. John Hall on here not too long ago talking about electronic harassment, MK Ultra, the mind control, the Fed. That's a big issue. All of these things that you're into or you've written about. They're news that's making news today. So, from your perch, what's the most important or the most where we should really focus on?
Well, you're going to hear other people talk about how this is an information war, and there's some truth to that. Knowledge is power, and my people the scriptures talk about how they're lacking a vision, they're lacking knowledge, and that's going to lead them into ruin. So there is a certain truth to that, but even deeper than that is the problem of the heart. It's really a spiritual battle. It's a battle between the kingdom of death and the kingdom of life, and the battle starts within each person's heart. And unless we get our hearts right, unless we love the truth, I can give you all the truth that there is, but unless you love it, it's going to bounce off. You're going to throw it in the garbage. And so this all goes back to, we should live righteously, we should love God, we should set our affections on heavenly things, so to speak. We should have a desire to do noble things. In other words, we should be good people and love the truth. And I'm not preaching. I'm just telling people that's where the real battle is, because I've sat there and watched this thing for quite a few decades, and I've seen people that maybe started to they wanted to go crusade on some issue, and before you know it, because of their own deficiencies in character, they make a shipwreck of everything. And so it's really important that if we're going to have a positive influence in our world, that we get our own act together spiritually. And I'm not saying that we all have to be Jesus Christ himself, but where our hearts are is the start of the battle. And so that's where I would say the foundation is. Like the Word of God says, that the truth will not save you, it's the love of the truth, and that's in 2 Thessalonians. Now that's so true. Going back to the scriptures, because a lot of the listeners probably are scriptures, when I talk about the Illuminati, I'm really speaking biblical concepts. In 1 John it says the whole world lies in the control of the evil one. It says in another spot that Satan's the god of this world. It says in Psalms 2 that the kings of the earth join together and conspire against God and his elect. So when I'm talking about a secret governing elite that are generational Satanists, I'm not saying anything that's unbiblical. But it surprises me how many people within Christendom or within the churches are really upset by hearing these kind of things. For some reason, for different reasons, they want to live in a nice, warm, fuzzy world. They want to think that somehow the Republicans and Democrats are going to rescue us. They want to. They think that if it gets bad enough, that they'll be raptured out, so they don't need to do anything. They think that falsely that all they need to do is have read sinner's prayer for 5 minutes, and that's the extent of what God expects from them. so they don't want to face the problems, the reality that we're in,
Yeah, Mr. Springmeier, would you say that the current Christianity and the churches, who's more at fault? Is it the Christians who fail to read their Bible beyond what is read to them at church, or is it the church's fault for failing to read the whole gospel instead of keeping selective parts that they don't read?
Well, the way I would approach that is referring back to the research in my massive 800-page Be Wise as Serpents. My book, Be Wise as Serpents, is an overview of the control of the world system of systems. I especially go into the religious aspect. And what I do is I go denomination by denomination, and a lot of these denominations were created by Freemasons and have been controlled by Freemasons. And not only that, but a lot of Christian education seminaries and whatnot have been controlled by Freemasons. The point I'm making is Christianity has been made into a program multiple personality, if you want to describe it that way. And so it's not something that Christ did. It's people that actually have an anti-Christ agenda have come in and hijacked Christianity, turned it into what I call Christendom, and they have created all these denominations. Each one of them has a little bit of the truth, and they all want to strut around like they're the best. And we need to get away from that. We need, Christ said, the scriptures were totally against denominationalism, and so that's one of the problems. There is the leadership of these churches has been created. I expose some of the leadership, the top leadership in Christianity, are actually people that have been placed there by the Illuminati, financed by the Illuminati, and put there. So Christendom's been hijacked. So they're being given from the pulpit. They're being fed bad information. They're being lulled to sleep, and so it's not entirely the fault of the lay people sitting there in the pew. But another way of looking at it is we're all adults, and we all have to stand responsible for the decisions we make. And if we're going to sit in a church that's lukewarm, that's not preaching the truth, we can't blame the preacher when we go before God's judgment. We are all adults. We need to stand responsible for what we're doing. And so ultimately the responsibility lies with the people that are allowing themselves to be put to sleep.
Well, this is pretty interesting. Now you just covered the religious aspect, and I use that term perhaps rather loosely. The Illuminati has infected, and I'm using that term deliberately, has infected the various, I'll say religious institutions, the political houses all across the globe, the social society in general. But stepping back now to the religious component of this, and I see this happening more and more. There is this level of tolerance, tolerance of evil. When there's tolerance of evil, that makes tolerance itself become evil, in my view.
Yeah, tolerance and acceptance.
Right. And certainly it's antithetical to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And that, to me, is unacceptable. And when the teachings of Jesus Christ are watered down or convoluted or distorted, many souls are at stake and can be lost. But you're saying, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that this is the agenda. Part of their agenda is to deceive and to water this down. They're placing people in these positions. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. Yes, there's a very detailed, specific campaign to control the churches, and a lot of these churches, if you start tracing where their money's coming from, a lot of churches receive money through the Rockefellers, and so the point is they're not going to bite the hand that feeds it,
That's true.
I'll tell the listeners out there, because, the Illuminati is not afraid of Christendom. They are not afraid of the Bible. Now, they should be afraid of God, but they're not God-fearing people, and I have seen some of these people, and I have been amazed at the pride that controls their thinking, and they really mock God. And of course, we're told that God is not going to be mocked, but they mock the whole thing, and they're not above using religious terms. They're not above creating a Christian denomination. They don't even care if the minister preaches a sound sermon, as long as they control it. They're just not afraid, like I say, of God, and so sometimes Christians think, well, so-and-so preacher preached a scriptural sermon. Well, that's neither here nor there as far as the Illuminati is concerned. In fact, it's even worse than what I'm making out, because if the listeners get into the Illuminati mind control, which I wrote 3 books on, 2 of the books, the Illuminati formula used to create an undetectable total mind-controlled slave, and its sequel, which is a 600-page book called Deeper Insights. If they get into how the Illuminati do a total mind control through trauma-based mind control, they will discover that there are trigger words that can be embedded in a sermon. I've even heard these trigger words when I've listened to some of these sermons. And so the minister could be up there up front, and he could be giving a sermon that was scripturally sound, and at the same time using these trigger words and telling somebody in the audience to go murder someone, And so we've got to expand our realization to see that they've been operating outside of our box of expectations. Anyway,
wow.
I'll let you guys.
No, I mean that's an incredible. When you think about this,
subliminally using deceitful, manipulative ways to send messages to the congregation.
Well, what you mentioned, Fritz, about trauma-based mind control, and of course that takes us back to MK Ultra and other government projects. I mean, we could spend days upon days talking about this, right. But this is going on today to form to influence events here in the world today, and it's not only coming from politics, but you're saying it's coming from pulpits as well. Wow.
One of my favorite examples of the way the intelligence agencies operate, and this applies across the board to all of them, because they say because of national security we can't tell you this, we can't disclose this. They're always using our national security to cover their own butts, to cover up their crimes. And my favorite example of how this works is in World War II, the British government in 1940 flew British planes over Germany with propaganda leaflets, and they spread 2 million leaflets. This one leaflet got very widespread coverage. 2 million of them were dropped. And somebody tried, in their form of freedom of information, so to speak, back then, tried to find out from the British government what was in that leaflet that they dropped. And do you know, the British government said, we can't disclose that information because it might be of value to the enemy. For reason of national security, they couldn't tell them the text of a leaflet that dropped 2 million of them on, because it might help the enemy. This is the kind of insanity we're dealing with even today, with Congress is well aware that the CIA, the NSA was practicing trauma-based mind control, the MK Ultra, and that's been, evidence has been brought before Congress repeatedly on this. New York Times even has written articles about MK Ultra. So these things are not a secret, but try finding anything of substance out, and then they're going to say, well, we can't tell you because of national security.
That's just crazy. I mean, and of course, we shouldn't be surprised by that, of course, is what we're seeing today. But wow, okay, not to recap. And I've read your work as well. The Illuminati basically we're looking at about 13 or so specific bloodlines that go back quite a ways. I mean, it goes back to antiquity. Stop me if I'm misrepresenting what you've written. 13 elite bloodlines, and they've maneuvered themselves to positions of control over this planet, and the people, the members, lead practically double lives. One for society, the outward life, and then the hidden one, which is based on this Luciferian agenda. And one thing I found disturbing, this Luciferian agenda and these people, there's a lot of blood rituals that take place as well, and there's a lot of attention to astronomy and a lot of symbolism and occult. I mean, steep in occult. This new world order, this global design for a one world government, is based on the occult. And I know that's a pretty broad statement, but and you've written about the insiders who call themselves the network in the neighborhood, but that pretty much sums it up. And of course, you've got this infiltration by these, and they look upon us, the God-following Christians, the followers of Jesus Christ, the seed of Adam. They look upon us as for lack of a better term, the aliens, and they are the chosen ones. When in reality, it's the other way around. And does that kind of sum everything up a little bit?
Very well said there. These are generational satanic families. People object to me using the word satanic. They say, "Oh, that's your construct." No, like I say, I worked with people that were members of the Illuminati. In fact, I've personally spent time with quite a few people. I haven't tried to keep track of the exact number, but lots of people. In fact, a lot of members in the Illuminati would like to get out of it because it's slavery of the worst kind, but they're trapped in it. But there were a few people that were willing to risk getting out, and I worked with them. And very clearly, when they talk about what they were involved with, there's no question it was Satanism. And in fact, we're coming up upon All Hallows Eve, where there's going to be fire festivals and a great spot, sexual rituals, blood sacrifices, and look at how this nation is lining up with all of that. Already you see the Halloween agenda out there. So everybody goes right along with celebrating this horrific holiday or ritual.
I never quite understood the origins of Halloween, and I know it's kind of an off-topic thing, but really, it's I cannot believe how brainwashed people are into misunderstanding what Halloween is all about. This sacred occult holiday. It's when you start getting into this and separating or start really digging into the facts, you will be surprised. I mean, I was surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. The one thing I want to, because we're getting up close to the top of the hour break, and I know that we had a lot of this, folks, and thank you for being patient. A lot of this was just kind of laying the groundwork. But one of the things that you mentioned, I believe you mentioned this, and that kind of surprised me as well in my initial quest, was Freemasonry, and how Freemasonry throughout these centuries actually has played into this globalist agenda, and how you look at the layouts of Washington D.C. in Rome, in the Vatican and such, and you see the occult symbolism or the Masonic symbolism. And of course the dollar bill. The occult symbolism on our money, I should say, not the dollar bill. All of this seems to be tied together into a larger globalist agenda, including, like I said, Freemasonry. But people will often say to me, "Well, hey, I know my Uncle Bob's a Mason, and he's a good guy." What would you say to something like that?
Oh, there's many organizations that are fronts for the Illuminati, but one of the first organizations that has a lot of power that they illuminized, that they control, is Freemasonry. Now, Now, that doesn't mean that just because somebody is in a particular organization that they're a member of the Illuminati. Like Freemasonry needs a certain amount of members just to pay dues to keep the lights on. And, of course, if we go to a book called Externalization of the Hierarchy by Alice Bailey, she tells us that organizations like Freemasonry are going to be allowed to decline because what they're doing is they're taking all of these secret symbols and secret rituals that were done by the occult world, by the Illuminati's occult world, and they're externalizing them into society. And boy, if that isn't true, if you look at all of these celebrity idols, they're all making these Illuminati symbols, the all-seeing eye, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. These things are being externalized, so Freemasonry's fading. It's not. The membership is in decline. But I would like to the way I would describe Freemasonry, it's like the glove on the hand. If Freemasonry's the hidden hand, excuse me, I said that wrong. If the Illuminati's the hidden hand, Freemasonry's the glove on that hand.
And we have, when looking at this, we have many hidden hands. We have Freemasonry. We have
many gloves.
Many gloves. The Jesuits, people say, all these different, the Bilderberg group, and I know that a lot of these intertwine with each other.
Yes.
But there are several of these secret society type groups that keep everything a secret. They have their compartmentalization, as the pyramid represents that. As you talked about Albert Pike, he was said to be one of the highest level Freemasons, and he's the only what is it with Washington D.C.? He's the only one who has a statue of himself.
The Confederate general, the only Confederate general who has a statue in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and to me that says a lot, to have somebody so well known for the darkness of what he has done and said to be memorialized like that in our nation's capital. That should say a lot to everybody about what our national capital is about. And hopefully we can get into this a little bit more in the second hour about the history, a little bit of the history of the United States and what role the U.S. played in your mind, the Constitution, what role it played not only from setting up this great prosperous nation, but what, if any, were the cynical and evil laid agendas in part of this plan of America.
Exactly, and I'd also like to get into, to bring it up to present day, and that kind of mark present day in my mind in thinking about the Illuminati with George Herbert Walker Bush's 9/11 1990 speech, his New World Order speech. From there, it seems to have kicked off something a little bit more. Something seems to have accelerated. So all of this and more, in the second hour with more specificity. But in the few minutes we have before the top of the hour break, if there's one thing about that you could say about the Illuminati that you would want people to really understand in the last minute and a half we have, what would it be?
Going back to my statement of the kingdom of death, they're a cult of death. And I just encourage people to move towards life, and life more abundant. Christ said, I came to give you life and life more abundant. Christ wasn't just talking about some life up in some cloud, playing a harp in heaven. He was talking about giving a more abundant life here and now for us. And that's what we need to work towards, enjoying life, having joy, learning how to love each other, and all these positive things. That's where life is at, and that's what we want to move towards. We have to balance things so that we don't live in fear, because it says, like, for instance, in Psalms 27, the Lord is my light, and it says, whom shall I fear? The Lord is my strength, whom shall I be afraid? It's calling for us not to be afraid, but to move towards life. And that's what I'm for. That's what I'm trying to move people towards, is getting away from this cult of death and moving towards having an abundant life.
Amen to that. With that, we're up against the top of the hour break. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Thursday, October 17th, with a very special guest, Mr. Fritz Springmeier. Visit his site at pentracks.com. That is pentracks.com. and bookmark his site and check it out and look at the books he has for sale. And one of the greatest ones that I've heard about and kind of has come across my desk, different notes and points from it, is Bloodlines of the Illuminati. It is a classic. Check out his book at pentrax.com.
That's a really great primer. That's a really great primer, by the way. Really great book.
Yeah, it is, and I can't wait to read it for myself, as I have not done that yet. We'll be right back after these short messages. Stay with us with our very special guest, Fritz Springmeier.
Folks, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, American Survival Wholesale. It's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. They put together something really interesting. It's the Brother Marcus Christian Ninja Survival Toolbox. Did you get all that? The Brother Marcus Christian Ninja Survival Toolbox. What you get, and this is a great toolbox to have. It's actually a toolbox with a handle. Inside, a Holy Bible with the King James Version of the Holy Bible, a magnesium fire starter with cotton, a compass, a tactical knife, 2,400 calorie food bar. It's got a 4-year shelf life. I mean, it's even more than Twinkies. Filtration straw, clean sip water filtration straw, filters up to 200 gallons of water. Great in an emergency. A set of emergency tools, first aid kit. I could go on, but I'm not going to. The retail value of this is well upwards of $100. American Survival Wholesale is selling it for $79 plus a flat rate shipping of $10. Here's the greatest part of it all. You ready for this? All net proceeds. Buying this Ninja Survival Toolbox, all net proceeds will go to Brother Marcus, his ministry, his operations. It's just gonna. The donations are well worth the purchase of this toolbox, folks. Visit AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. We've got a lot of emails from people wanting to support Brother Marcus. This is one way you can do it, and have something for your family as well in case of an emergency. That's the Brother Marcus Christian Ninja Survival Toolbox. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
If you are stumped, you don't know what kind of gift to give to a friend or a loved one, I'm telling you, you must go to 4physics.com. That's the numeral 4, PHYSICSS.com. This is your one-stop shopping palace. That's the only way I can put it. I could spend easily an hour on this website. Innovative, fun, educational. There are games, books, weather instruments, unique time-telling devices, jewelry, optical devices, laboratory equipment. Let me give you an example. We all know we can tell time with a sundial. You've seen those advertised. Did you know that you could tell time by the stars? At 4physics.com, you can buy a horologium nocturnum. This was a navigational device used in the 15th century by navigators at night to tell time by the stars. It's beautifully crafted in the shape of a pendant made of bronze and pewter or gold and silver. Absolutely a stunning gift. I would be proud to give it to anyone. You must go to 4physics.com. Even if you're not stumped, that's 4physics. That's the numeral 4, PHYSICS.com. It's your one-stop shopping palace. Any problems that you have, I don't know what to get Grandpa, I don't know what to get my loved one, that's unique, you will find it at 4physics.com. Please take my word for it. Go to the website, but give yourself a lot of time because you're not going to want to leave. 4physics.com.
Answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Northeast intelligence.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Thursday, October 17th, 2013. Don't forget, tomorrow we have a special show with Steve Quayle and Pastor David Langford. They will be coming on. Go to HomelandSecurityUS.com. The promotion for the show is up on the front page. And be here tomorrow, 8 p.m. for that show. Now, back to our show tonight with our very special guest, Mr. Fritz Springmeier. Mr. Springmeier, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. If we could get into what we started to at the end of the hour, America's role in the New World Order, in the satanic agenda. In your mind or in your research, was America set up for a free country to make a people free, or is it set up with more nefarious purpose or agenda in mind, or was it taken over after it was set up? What has your research shown in that regard?
Well, whenever we have things happen, there can be different levels of why they happen, and of course, those of us who know that God is in control of things knows that as Satan's operating, God is allowing Satan to actually fulfill his agenda, Like Satan was quite proud that he was able to crucify Christ. He obviously didn't realize what he was doing. So there's different ways we can approach an event. Something like, why did the Civil War happen? Why did the Vietnam War happen? There's different levels of understanding. But if we are looking at what the plans were of the Illuminati bloodline, there was an intention to create a new world, and that new world would allow several things to happen. For instance, the Astor bloodline, which came from Waldorf, Germany. If you look at the Astors, which was an ancient occult bloodline, but they were commoners in Germany. And when they came over to the colonies, Astor, within a few years, thanks to string pulling by those that were in power in the elite, the Astor bloodline became extremely rich and extremely powerful. So the New World allowed some of these bloodlines to rise, where in Europe, where the structure was real solidified, they were stuck in their social class. So the Astors rose to the top of society, and then later, after several generations, immigrated to England, became barons, became royalty over there, because actually one of the things that I expose is the bloodline behind European royalty is one of the Illuminati bloodline, and that connects in with the United States' creation. If we go back and look at someone that was back in the 17th century, Francis Bacon, and he wrote a book called The New Atlantis. Well, the original title to that book was The Land of the Rosicrucians, and he foresees things in the future and what's going to happen, the kind of society that we have today. But the goal of these powerful bloodlines was to create a government like the United States today, where you could have a humanistic philosophy where people could believe in something besides God. On the other hand, there were certain groups in Europe that really were devout believers in God, and the Pilgrims, the Mennonites, and other groups that wanted religious freedom. And they came over to the colonies, the New World, to get a new start, to get religious freedom. So not everybody that came over was trying to work an occult agenda. Some of them were trying to work a godly agenda. So the people in power, it was up to them then to hijack the whole process and move this thing in a direction that they wanted. And they did. The first revolution that they tried to create, which was by Nathaniel Bacon, who was a descendant of Sir Francis Bacon, it didn't work. The first American Revolution fell flat on its face. And so they had to they had to try again. If you look at the American Revolution, you will see that there were Freemasons on both sides And the English generals, the British generals, were in a position to have destroyed George Washington's army when they were coming across New Jersey, and yet they allowed them to escape and to go into camp. And so if you look real carefully at things, you can see that there was an agenda that was carried out by these secret societies, and they managed to pull off a successful American Revolution. They started out with the Articles of Confederation, and the Articles of Confederation didn't give the elite enough central power, so they came back and wrote a constitution, but they knew that the common people who wanted freedom and liberty were not going to go along with the constitution. So in order to get that pill down our throats, they came up with the Bill of Rights, those 10 amendments. And so, you know, in practical terms, we did get liberty. The United States was set up and actually gave a lot of freedom and liberty to people. Even though this was all part of an occult agenda, there were a lot of positive things that happened. And I'm kind of running over the surface of things. You know, I'm not being exactly too detailed here, but so you have positives and negatives going on at the same time. So I just don't want to paint a picture that everything was black or everything was white. But it was a mixture of different people with different agendas, and indeed, in the reality of what transpired, the American people were actually given a lot of liberty due to the American Revolution. But all I would say is the people that framed the Constitution framed it in such a way like they left a thread in there that when they pulled that thread, they could give us the kind of big government and tyranny that we have today. And when they needed to, they took us that direction.
And that was done intentionally. Is that true?
Yes, it was done intentionally. They gave with one hand, but they made sure that they set it up so that they could move this country in the direction that they needed when they wanted to take our freedoms away. And when they debated the Constitution, if you look at those debates, I've looked at the wording, the people that loved freedom, that weren't Federalists, they knew exactly what was going on. They said, hey, if you do this, and this is going to happen, you know, and they were right on. They knew that Constitution was going to take away our freedoms.
So there was moral, righteous, and spiritual opposition to the Illuminists within the. We'll just say that there was differing camps, and there was the presence of the Holy Spirit, I would say, and moral and righteous and spiritual objection to the Illuminists, what they were doing and how they were doing it, and how they were kind of setting us up. But for 200 years, we'll say, freedom did prevail here in the United States. And I'm talking in broad strokes here, using broad strokes, but nonetheless, this country has been what I would call an impediment to the New World Order for the last couple of hundred years, except when it began its breakdown, when we saw the Fed, created in 1913. And again, I'm just picking out certain events. Okay,
and we've talked on shows before. That this isn't hopeless. We know God's plan, Bible prophecy, is going to eventually, all things that He says will happen. But we're also told that we don't have to have a what's the words I'm looking for? Not a negative attitude.
Defeatist attitude.
Right.
I mean, you can't resign. You've got to occupy until his coming.
We know we can still affect change today, even with all that's going on. What is, in your mind, what has been the best way to affect change on an individual level or a bigger level? Is it because we know that the people kind of awaken in stages. Some people awaken and find their way to the truth about Jesus and His salvation, and then some people awaken and are angry and hostile and want to do things that are outside of what Jesus says we should do. What do you think is a efficient way to lead people in the right direction, but waking people up at the same time, not overloading them on what they would call religious or scripture, too much scripture?
Wow!
Don't give them too much scripture. Well, I'm going to start out with giving them a scripture. It says in the scripture that faith overcomes the world, or by extension, faith overcomes the New World Order. So we need to move out in faith. And I have been explaining to people with Facebook posts that I give every day, and the listeners are welcome to read my Facebook posts that I put up there every day. I've been explaining to the readers, my followers there on Facebook, what that kind of faith looks like. And so it's important to move forward in that kind of faith, because that's what the Word says is going to succeed. And in my life, I have seen, in a practical application, I've actually seen that kind of faith does give a person incredible power. And the basis of that faith is not in ourselves. It's not saying that I am sufficient, but it's saying that God is sufficient and God is good. We need to believe in a good God and that He has the power to do good things and the love for us to do those good things. So that's very important. That faith allows a person to move forward. Then the next thing that I would say is that most of the things that are accomplished in the world are really done by an individual. It's surprising, I'm sure most of the listeners have heard, how maybe 5% of the people are doing something, and another maybe 10% or 15% are aware of what they're doing, and the rest are just moving through life, It's that there's a certain truth to that, and so move up in life and be one of those 5%ers. It's surprising what one person stepping forward in faith with God with them can do. Look at the young boy David, and he steps up there, and there's this huge army facing the Philistines, but they're worthless. The army's of no value. But this little boy stepping forward in faith, challenging Goliath, was worth more than an entire army. And each one of the listeners out there, if they will step forward in faith, they will be surprised that God will be their what's the word I'm looking for here? God will be their power behind them. It's not that they're going to will themselves and through willpower. It's not name it and claim it, grab it. It's not that kind of faith that I'm talking about, but I'm talking about moving forward where you believe in the good character of God so that He can empower you with His Spirit. And make an analogy, a little match, if you light a little match in a dark room, that little match will light up the entire room. And so think of yourself, we're all just little matches. I'm just a little person just like the next person. And you can be inspired, and God will open the doors and do great things through your life if you step forward in faith. So that's what I would tell people, It's not a matter of numbers. We're not going to outdo them as far as, because most people, unfortunately, and the scriptures even back this up, the majority of people, on the broad way, they don't care, it's not like we're going to successfully challenge the world order numbers-wise, because I convert one person's mind to the truth, one person at a time, where they come along and through a 30-minute propaganda show on television, change the thinking of millions of people. Now, being on this show is an exception. I'm probably on this show having a lot of leverage. I'm not just dealing with one person on this show, so that's an exception. But in general, it's a very slow process for us compared to the abilities that the world system has to influence.
Well, you know what, Fritz, and I'll just share this with the listeners. We had a conversation before the show, and something you said really kind of struck me, and you reiterated it during the show, but I think it warrants mention again. And we talk about the information war that's out there, and there is an information war out there. There's a propaganda war. But you took it a step further, and you said, if your heart is not right. Now, I take that personally to mean if I'm not in sync with Jesus Christ, my personal Lord and Savior, then all the information in the world is not, I mean, it's good, but it's not enough. So, once again, there is an information war, but your heart, what's in your heart, and your submission, your love for Jesus Christ, and that's the health of your spirit is a key component. Because otherwise, that information is not going to be well received or properly acted upon. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would take it a little bit further, too. I would say our weaknesses are things like greed, lust, and so let's say somebody does get on track and wants to work towards something noble. The enemy is watching. You know, they watch me, they watch you, and they're always trying to derail us and even kill us and discredit us, and so how easy it is if we're not more on taking the moral high ground, and let's say we're sauntering along, we will be caught by pride, which will blind us. We will be entrapped by lust and greed, and all you have to do is go on the internet. Or here, I live in Portland, Oregon, and in the last 30, 40 years, it's just gone from a handful of strip joints to 150, 200. They're all over. They're on every major street. And so it's so easy. It would be so easy for a person to get sidetracked with onto drugs or lust or greed or any of these other things and totally derail. And so don't think that the enemy isn't out there looking for whatever your weakness is, because he is. We're in a spiritual war. We've got powers. It says the principalities and powers. Those powers are intelligent powers that are watching. And my experience, and I'm just telling this, from decades of experience out here, I've seen lots of people taken down because of their lack of morals and their pride, and so it's like going into battle without armor, and the next thing you know, you're just chopped to pieces.
Wow, that's so true. And learning about the armor of God, the armor that we need to have. Excuse me. So many people think, using our human, fleshly, carnal minds, and if they're not in the Word of God, they don't understand the spiritual warfare that goes on, and that's something we talk about here on our show at times. And the spiritual warfare, I think, is what people are enduring now more than ever, and it's coming into not only the churches, but individuals' households, into their lives, into their relationships. There's a division among even Christians, and we see this division growing, and it's fed by politics. It's fed by some of the things you talked about, greed and different agendas. Do you see a huge split in the Christian church community? Do you see families warring against each other about belief systems?
Oh yeah, and this is all by design. It's divide and conquer, and see that one of the things we can lack is love. If we're willing to hate and become angry, the enemy will use that. It's like the enemy just has a big handle to manipulate us with, and the next thing you know, there'll be some reason to hate, and then you'll be set at odds with someone else. So if you look out into American society, they've created a war between men and women. They're trying to create tension between the blacks and the whites. They're trying to divide every group imaginable against each other, and then when we're all at each other's throats, we're easy to control. It's divide and conquer. So yeah, exactly. It's not by accident that a large share of our marriages end in divorce. There's all kinds of benefits for those that control us in having the family run. The family is one of the strongholds for any person. Your family is to be like your castle that you move forward into the world. And when the family is destroyed, it really pulls the rug out from underneath a person.
The nuclear family is antithetical to the satanic agenda.
Exactly.
The traditional family. And I love conversations like this, Fritz. This is like, to me, this is like sitting around at a kitchen table having coffee with you and talking with you, kind of letting it just all flow where it goes. By the way, I got to say this: you must have quite an immense following out there, because I don't know, 4 pages worth of email questions from listeners all over the country, all over the world, actually. And I'm going to be hitting you with a lot of questions from listeners who have sent them to me via email, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
so
that's what I'm here for.
We're going to be going into multiple directions here, folks. So kind of buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seat backs are locked in their full upright position. But one of the things you said earlier about the Constitution and pulling on that thread, Sandy sent an email about that, questioning something, and then I never gave this a thought in this fashion. And we, again, I like to say we've got the smartest, most intelligent radio audience out there. And this question does prove it to me. And thank you, Sandy, for this. When you mentioned about the Constitution, there was, of course, the Federalist Papers and the men and the men who drafted the Constitution. But that thread of pulling on that thread to possibly dismantle what was set up, what was established. She writes, would you ask your guest, was that the reason, perhaps, that Benjamin Franklin said that famous quote, "A republic, if you can keep it"? Of course, that was in response to a question. What did you create? Paraphrasing now.
Good question. I can't speak for Benjamin Franklin as to why he said that, but it's very possible. Benjamin Franklin was a high-ranking Freemason bloodline, and at his house in England where he lived, they have uncovered hidden bodies of children that were used in sacrifices. He was a member of the Hellfire Club, which was a satanic fraternity.
Boy, we don't like to hear that. We you know what, Fritz? We don't like to hear that stuff about our forefathers, do we? I mean, that's scary stuff.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, not so scary then. Let's just put.
No. Look
at Benjamin Franklin. He was the Postmaster General of the British colonies in America. Now, I want to explain to people that position was the head spy. That's like being the head of the NSA, because everything that was written that was moved through the post office, they would secretly open it up and they would spy on people. And so you did not become the Postmaster General unless you were in an extreme position of power. And Benjamin Franklin was the leading Freemason and the leading Rosicrucian in North America.
Wow.
And the reason why he got so much respect, deference at all of these Continental Congress meetings and so forth was because he was the head of all of these people in the secret societies that they belonged to.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And by the way, I didn't say that to discourage you from going going into the scary spots. No, we go wherever the evidence leads, regardless of how uncomfortable it might be, because we're after the truth, the whole truth. And yeah, the discovery of the bodies, it just seems like when you talk to the average person today and tell them something less than favorable, less than a good light about our forefathers, they become very defensive and call you anti-patriotic. Well, you're no patriot then. And it's, wow.
I can understand where people are coming from, because they've taken a history class, they maybe read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, which I read when I was 13. The thing of it is going back to something we talked about in the first hour, the trauma-based mind control creates programmed multiple personalities. So the front personality of some of these people can really be a pretty nice person, and they can have deeper personalities that are the opposite. I visited with, for instance, one Christian minister in the Midwest, and, his front personality was a Christian minister, and horror of horrors, at some point, the dissociative walls between him and his deeper personalities broke down, and he came to realize he had personalities that were Satanists. How horrible. And,
wow.
And so this is what we're looking at, you know. I mean, these people can put on a good front. Benjamin Franklin put on a wonderful front. He wrote an autobiography, and his autobiography was written so that people would emulate the kind of person he wrote about. Now, so in other words, he said favorable things about himself in his autobiography. What's interesting is I have a book by a Freemason Saxe, and it's the entire Masonic history or career of Benjamin Franklin. And every day, because Benjamin Franklin was the leading Freemason in North America, every day as an adult, he was going to a Masonic meeting. And he was totally busy with Freemasonry and these secret societies. Like I say, he was the head of Rosicrucians and the Freemasons. And yet, in his autobiography, he never mentions Freemasonry one time. But if you talk to Freemasons, they say it's an organization to make good men better. Well, if it's an organization to make good men better, why was he afraid to even mention it one time in his autobiography when his whole life was consumed with the organization? Because Freemasonry has a sinister level to it, even back then.
Well, the multiple levels of Freemasonry, I was once told, and this statement has another side to it, but with respect to Freemasonry, it applies here. The lie is different at every level. So at the first level, you're told something, and at the second level, you're told that the first, to get you up to the second, we had to kind of deceive you. And again, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but you get the idea. The lie is different at every level. And, then when you get to the top, and few do get to that very top, or few are selected, I guess, then you get to know the truth. Is that pretty accurate?
This goes, that is accurate. This goes along with the concept knowledge is power, and I can create an instant power base if I say I have secret knowledge that's going to save you. And this Gnostic knowledge is used as a control, as something to control people with. The mystery religions, way back in antiquity, used this. They would say, okay, if you join us, we've got these secrets, and these secrets will give you power, and these secrets will save you, and so people join. And as you join Freemasonry, initially they'll tell you that their G, the G in the square and compass, means God. But then as you go up through the levels, they'll tell you, oh, this stands for Gnosis, knowledge. But then when you get higher up, it stands for the generative principle, which means buggering little boy. And I'm not saying that on my own authority. I spoke with the highest ranking Freemason to defect to Christianity, Jim Shaw, and he was a 33rd degree Freemason, and I had a number of conversations over the phone with him about Freemasonry, and I got it from the horse's mouth, and so they take you through these different levels, just like you're saying, stringing you along, and you pay like $110 for every degree that you go up, and they constantly got to string you along with, well, we didn't give you all of it, because in these mystery religions, you can't give away all your secret knowledge, or you've just given away your power base. So you have to make the person dependent on you. So you have to constantly tell them, well, there's just a little bit more, you got to stay with us because you haven't quite reached the top level, So you're always being strung along.
Yeah, and have you ever seen anybody who has made it to a higher rank of Freemasonry and was finally told the truth about what it was and said, wait a second, I'm out of here? Or are those stories kept quiet, like me and my dad have been there in New York in the 1800s. A Freemason wrote a book and they killed him for it, and it's a famous case.
Morgan.
Yeah, in Batavia. Yeah, Morgan. Have you met anybody who's been, actually I shouldn't say that. Do you think it happens more frequently than we hear about it, or the few people who make it out to talk about it, of people turning away from it, or are they just killed?
Well, this man that I just referred to, who was a 33rd degree Freemason, he was quite wealthy because as a Freemason he had lots of contacts. As soon as he left Freemasonry, they destroyed him financially. And whenever he would get a couple dimes together to print up some more of his tracts, he would print up some more tracts exposing Freemasonry. But the Christians, unfortunately, the mainstream churches didn't appreciate what he had done and who he was, and because they should have had him out on circuit speaking. I have spoken to a few other Freemasons that realized what they were into, but they didn't do it as dramatically as he did. What they did is they just quietly quit participating and going to meetings. They didn't make a break where they got into anybody's face and said, okay, I'm against this. They just quietly quit participating, and they were able to drift into obscurity without upsetting anyone.
Interesting. Well, I guess, what else would you expect? What else would you expect? Fritz, I got a question here that I got to tell you, and thank you, Margot, from Oklahoma. She writes this, and again, Fritz, just to let you know, we're going to be going kind of all over the place because there are so many people wanting to ask you so many questions. I don't know if you, you must have a number of followers, which is great. But here's a question that I think is fascinating. Margot writes that she says, I was brought up Catholic, and I've always wondered, but could never quite put my finger on the Vatican's Illuminati role, if any. She references the Tom Hanks movie and such, but what's the truth?
Oh, okay, well, I'm glad she asked, because one of the things that disturbs me, in a sense, I try to keep the peace of God about me, but there's people that latch on to distorted thinking. They say, oh, this ethnic group here, this group here, they're the bad guys, and they create these false dialectics. And so, the Illuminati is worldwide. There's Chinese Illuminati, there's Vietnamese Illuminati, there's Illuminati members around the world. It isn't one ethnic group, it isn't one nationality, it isn't one religion. These are the people that created our system. They're the ones that created these religions, these corporations. So this thing has been going on a long time. So the Catholic Church, being as large as it is, of course, anywhere that there's power, that the Illuminati is going to make sure that they co-opt that. So the Catholic Church a long time ago was brought into their sphere of power. You can see that, for instance, the Freemason Napoleon. Napoleon took over the Pope, and he controlled the Vatican. You will notice that the Jesuits, there was a Pope who tried to outlaw the Jesuits. Well, he actually did. He outlawed the Jesuits. And who saved the Jesuits from extinction? The head of the Freemasons, who was the King of Prussia, Frederick, he invited he gave asylum to the Jesuits. So the head of the Freemasonry gave asylum to the Jesuits until they could be reestablished, until the Catholic Church, under pressure, backed down from banning them. So the Jesuits are indeed a nasty organization. The man who started them was connected with the Alumbrados, which was the Illuminati in Spain. So there's over the years, the Catholic Church hierarchy has become controlled by the Illuminati, lock, stock, and barrel controlled by them. But that doesn't mean that a village priest out here is not a good person, You have some sincere priests that have gotten into the priesthood that may be out in some village that might be a genuinely decent person. So we can't use black and white thinking and just say, okay, so because somebody's Catholic, they're bad, they're an evil person.
Right.
It doesn't work that way in life. But the hierarchy is totally corrupt. And one of the things I did in 92 or 93 is I printed the names of 200 Vatican officials who were Freemasons, and 2 men lost their lives to get that information out. It was their secret membership numbers. It was just their secret affiliations with Freemasonry, which you might say, what? I thought Catholics weren't supposed to be Freemasons. Well, hey, the leadership in the Vatican are Freemasons, and they're part of these secret societies. And in my Be Wise as Serpents book, I talk about how in the 60s, the leadership of the Freemasons and the leadership of the Knights of Columbus, which is a fraternal organization for the Catholics, how they started having high-level meetings to coordinate their activities. And what was interesting was, as I discovered that the same organization that makes the badges and the pins and whatnot for the Masons makes it for the Knights of Columbus. In other words, they're one sloppy, gooey mess, you know. So again, like Freemasonry being the hand, the Vatican hierarchy is another. I said that wrong. As Freemasonry being the glove on the hand, the Vatican hierarchy is another glove on the hand of the Illuminati.
Okay, and that's well said. Of course, we have to look at this. You know, we're not indicting an entire group of people. You're looking at the infiltration from the top that we're talking about here. Nice segue, by the way, into a question from Robert K. from Coon Rapids, Minnesota. Okay, wow, didn't even realize that exists. A suburb of Minneapolis. He says he wants you to comment, and this is a good time to do so. Comment on the current papal situation in the Vatican with the Jesuit Pope that we have. Planned? Was this kind of a coup in his question he's asking in the Vatican?
Well, a coup would imply that they had overthrown a previous power, and what I would postulate is that it was already corrupted before the new Pope. I don't believe this is going to be the last Pope, and I think that people are spurious in the way they're interpreting how they're making up prophecies and so forth. But no, we're just looking at more of the same thing. They're just getting more in our face. If we look at, you know, what's been written about in the externalization of the hierarchy, we see that Alice Bailey, who was Illuminati, she basically, paraphrasing and condensing the concept down, she basically says, we're going to get more and more in people's face with what's going on. So we're just seeing the trend to just, you know, they're going for broke. They're being more open about what they're doing. Okay, so they got a Jesuit. They're just going to, you know, they're not afraid of us seeing a Jesuit as a pope.
Okay, so what you're seeing, or what you're saying, is that we're seeing essentially a fulfillment of their agenda at work here. Okay,
exactly.
And all of this has been planned. Now we're seeing it come to fruition. Interesting. All right, now Catherine, and she's from Bakersfield. She wants me to ask you about NASA, America's Hagmann space program. What I mean, obviously, this NASA, she writes, is occult based. Their projects are named after pagan deities. I mean, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and such. Bigger part of the Illuminati. Big part of the Illuminati. Go ahead.
Well, the situation with NASA is reflective of so many ways that the Illuminati work. What they do is they pick a banner issue that everybody's in favor of. You know, like, let's save the environment, or let's go to the moon. You know, they pick a banner issue that nobody can argue with, and then they run agendas behind that banner issue. So when NASA was created, it was carrying out a number of agendas for the world elite. One of the agendas was military projects. A lot of the projects that NASA's been involved with were actually very horrifying militarization of space. Another agenda that they carried out that NASA's been working really close with was the control of humanity. You know, the spy satellites, a lot of the satellites that were put up were the complex of communication and spy satellites to allow the world system, the world order, to control us. So instead of working on science projects, they were assisting the world order in controlling us. Another thing that NASA has done is they have secretly done a lot of mind control projects. One is under their grant program, where they can grant money to people to research. Some of this research has been mind control projects. In fact, I exposed a few of these. And then also their facilities are being used as programming centers to do this trauma-based mind control, including harmonic mind control, which is even a newer technology beyond the trauma-based. So you can already see there some agendas that have already been done, and some of the agendas that they might be involved with in the future is they have created the ability to plant dreams or thoughts into people's minds. They used this in the first Gulf War, where they used directed energy to sculpt the clouds, and then they implanted into the Iraqi soldiers' minds using this high-tech mind control the thought, this is Allah speaking, and this is a holy war, but you're on the wrong side of the holy war. Just a simple message like that. And so there's Project Bluebeam, which will involve flying saucers and fake aliens, and it's very possible that one of the cards that they might play is a fake alien invasion, and they want to do something horrific like World War III or a fake alien invasion to unify the world and to get us to say, oh, please bring in this dictatorship to control us, to save us. And if we're not careful, that's exactly what people will do, is when they're frightened, they will cry out for this world order to save them.
Interesting. Now, in fact, wow, this hour went really quick.
Yeah.
We're going to have to talk about that on the other side, because I think that's important, this upcoming deception.
Yeah, absolutely, the upcoming deception. And to reiterate something you said about the Iraqi soldiers giving up, we were just wondering, we heard that from somebody else on our show before too. And also, Dad, I remember you telling me a story about during, I don't know if it was the Israeli war, 1971 war, when there was some countries, I think it was Egypt, yeah, and there was a line of Israeli soldiers, but it was from the enemy's perspective, they looked like there were much more soldiers than there were much more equipment, and the enemies backed off without engaging them.
That was Israel versus the Egyptian tank grouping, but yeah, that's from supernatural miracles to control of the enemy. But either way, Mr. Springmeier, in the closing minutes of this hour, the purpose of the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, was it to plunder technologies from Iraq, from ancient Babylon? Was that part of it?
Well, certainly there was some hidden agenda there to extract some ancient stuff that they got out of the museums. But I wouldn't go so far as to say there was only one reason. Of course, they pillaged the oil of Iraq, and they squandered the American taxpayers' money, because one of the things that the Illuminati want us to do is to bankrupt our country, and so they can take it down. So that was part of the agenda to destroy America, so it followed a number of agendas. But yeah, I could say I think that there was one of the reasons was to extract some things from the ancient world.
Interesting. Multifaceted, multi-objective, multi-agenda war, and of course serving many purposes all at the same time. Very interesting information. And wow, okay. And again, Joe, I've got, like I said, multiple pages here of questions for Mr. Springmeier.
Well, let's do this. Let's take a break a minute or two early here, and we'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll get into the questions.
All right, sounds great. Folks, you're listening to our special guest tonight, Fritz Springmeier. His website, Pentrax, that, in fact, pay a visit to it. His website is pentrax.com, and we'll link it off of our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this, the 17th day of October 2013. Very interesting program. Very interesting program. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be right back.
It's hard to imagine when things are going reasonably well, just how quickly things can change. But what would it take? Economic collapse, massive crop failure, chemical or biological attack? So many situations could find you in the grocery looking to pick up food for your family, only to find that the shelves are empty. There's nothing. Don't let that happen. Act today to make sure that if it ever comes to that, you and your family will be provided for. Visit freeze-dry-guy.com to look at the wide variety of survival foods available. Freeze-dried foods from the Freeze-Dry Guy store longer, rehydrate faster, are nutritionally superior to, and taste better than any other long-term storage food available. Visit freeze-dry-guy.com or call toll-free 866-404-3030. 3663. FreezeDryGuide.com.
Hi folks, Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eileen John Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the formation of the industrial and machinery with peaceful methods, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
You want answers? I think I can handle you. Want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour on this Thursday, October 17th, 2013, with our special guest, Mr. Fritz Springmeier. 2 full, fantastic hours. If you're joining us late, go back and listen to the rebroadcast to hear those. We are going to get into our third and final hour right now. Mr. Springmeier, a question to open up this hour. We just saw the political theater with the government and the economic system. What is the New World Order's agenda for the economic system, for bringing the consolidation of the economy together? Through your research, what have you found?
Well, United States, or I should say the American people, have too much liberty because they're somewhat independently wealthy. They're very mobile, and they have this delusion or illusion that they can be free people and do what they want. And so the world order definitely wants to take America down. The United States is slated for destruction, and our finances, United States as an entity, is being bankrupted. You'll see the enormous amount of money that's wasted through wars, that's wasted through NASA. We were just talking about NASA. On projects that don't benefit, don't give us any financial reward. They're just pouring trillions of dollars into these things to bankrupt our country as fast as they can. And on the other side of things, the BRIC agreement, you've got Brazil, Russia, India, China as the leaders. They have come together, and China has secretly negotiated agreements with the East Asian countries, and they have secretly created, and you're going to say, well, Fritz, I haven't heard this before. No, I'm just telling you inside information. Just because you haven't heard it before doesn't mean that it's not true. They have created the red plum currency. They are going to dethrone the United States as the world's reserve currency. Russia and China have been building, and India too, have been building up stocks of oil, gold, other tangible resources, so that when they come out with new currency, that it will be fundamentally sounder. You know, right now all the United States Federal Reserve notes are just funny money, and so they're going to create something that is sounder and something that will replace the American dollar. So we can continue to expect horrible things to happen financially to the United States, and the global elite, the Illuminati kingpins and their Fortune 500 companies. All of the Fortune 500 companies have offices in Shanghai, China, right? And these people, like the Rothschilds, they've been investing large shares of money into China since the 90s. And they're building up China, and they're going to make profits through China. Don't think that the Chinese are the only ones that are going to make profits, because these Illuminati kingpins have been building up China to replace United States.
Sorry about that delay there. I was on mute. But yeah, even Henry Kissinger, I remember seeing him on the news, 3, 4, 5 years ago, talking about building up the Eastern economies in order to have a safe haven for the global banksters, so that they could decrease the value in the Western world while keeping things flowing and having another place to do business. Unlike us everyday peasants or slaves, as they view it, these people have the ability to go across country lines, across international. There's no boundaries that they're held to with the amount of money that they have, and they can do this with their money.
Well, let me interject a question here. From your research, wouldn't this, and isn't this the ultimate objective here with the taking down of the U.S. dollar, killing the intentional murder of the U.S. dollar, essentially, the establishment of a global one world currency? Isn't this the precursor, or isn't this the run-up to the mark of the beast system?
Definitely.
Okay, all right.
Right. This goes back, for those that are familiar with the Bible, the Tower of Babel. This has all been tried before, where they tried to bring in a one world government. That was what the Tower of Babel was about, and they had the attitude that there's nothing that we can't do. And at that point, God confused them and brought divisions between their languages, because God didn't want a one-world government. The reason why he didn't want it is exactly what I just got through saying, is that there would be no limits to what evil could do. As long as we were broken up into 100, 200 nations, it limited to what the God of this world could do with his world. But now we're seeing, the unification with the transportation and communication leaping forward like it has. They're virtually getting, there's no limits to the evil that these people can do. And that's exactly what we're headed towards, is where they can control the entire world. When I say they can, I mean they're already doing it, but we're talking about control freaks here. We're talking about people that are addicted to power. And so even though they can control the world on the level that they already do, their power is not complete. That they want to take it a step further. So yeah, exactly.
Okay, and the placement, and I've always been very concerned, and when I see this, and I've done research on this, the selection, for example, of Barack Hussein Obama to be in power, and I'll even go so far as to say the selection of George W. Bush and George Herbert Walker Bush being placed in positions of power. Obviously, this is part of the larger agenda here. How close are we? And I know you don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not asking for dates, but I'm just asking for kind of a general sense here. How close are we to seeing the ultimate plan of the Illuminati come to fruition?
Yeah, that's a question that's dear to a lot of people's because we're all curious. How much more time do we have? What's the timetable of the agenda? From where I stand in working with people that were insiders, from reading their plans and so forth, there's been some major disruptions. Their timetable's been drastically revised, and a number of things have revised their timetable. So we've gone from the fast track to the slow track. And then the question is how slow is the slow track? Of course, for most of us, their slow track is too fast. Even for, even that's too fast. I don't think we're looking at anything drastic happening in the near future. When I say that, I mean, I expect that we're going to go into severe inflation in the next few years here in the United States, but we're going to have to wade through that period of economic collapse before we go into a few more phases. So we're looking at we're looking at going through several phases over a period of 10, 15 years.
Well, that's pretty generous in terms of time. And again, I'm not asking for specifics, but that's a pretty generous timetable when economists, for example. I just saw an interview with the gentleman who operates Shadow Stats, John Williams, I believe it is, who said, man, it's coming close, and he's painting a picture of months away, perhaps, from an economic collapse based on the attempt to kick the can down the road economically here in the U.S. Now, I understand that does not equate to the finality of the plan of the Illuminati, but it certainly moves the ball down the field a little bit further toward fulfillment. But you still think that there's more time than that left? Yeah,
for various reasons. That's my take on it. They wanted the financial collapse to come quite a bit sooner, and I think that some of my informers knew the plan, and based on that, it's very obvious that their timetable has been revised a number of times, and seeing that, I have taken the attitude of projecting that they're going to need more time than what they previously thought that they were going to need.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And as promised, we're all over the board based on the listener questions. Alice from Bakersfield. This one is your question here. It's a paragraph. I'll just summarize it here. The presidents elected here in the United States, explain, if you could, are they all related? I mean, is there a common bloodline with all of our presidents here in the United States?
One of the things that I was pleased with, or I guess you could say proud of in a sense, was in my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book, I give a genealogy chart showing how 25 American presidents are closely related. It's in the front and the back of the book, both. The larger blown-up versions in the back. So there, in one genealogy chart, you can see how 25 presidents are closely related. And then I give a series of other genealogy charts, showing how something like 15 presidents are descended from the English Plantagenet kings. How Edward I and his son, how so many presidents are descendant from them. And then I show genealogy charts too of the European royal bloodline, which is called the Holy Bloodline, the Merovingian bloodline. How there's a whole number of American presidents that are related to that bloodline. So a number of very prominent Illuminati bloodlines have contributed presidents. Not all. I don't think all presidents have been bloodline, because some of them have just been sort of like lackeys of the bloodlines, but were definitely from the start, when we had our American Revolution, we thought that we overthrew these bloodlines. We thought that we had overthrown royalty and all of this aristocratic nonsense. But what my genealogy charts show is that we thought we had, but they snuck in behind us. They just went undercover, under the current, so to speak, and a lot of our presidents have been part of these secret societies too. That's why on one of my pages I show pictures of a number of them in their Masonic garb. Or like Ronald Reagan on the cover of the New Age magazine, receiving his honorary 33rd degree in Freemasonry. So. We thought we got away from all of that, and unfortunately, they snuck around on us and continued their control. And not only that, but just realize too, presidents and politicians are really prostitutes. Politicians and prostitutes, same thing, because they work for money and think who has all the money.
Yeah, that leads right to the next question I wanted to ask. How much power does the president really have today? I mean, does he make decisions, the president, or is he more of a Chris Matthews, reading a teleprompter, reading what he's told to read when he's told to read it?
Well, our current president is just reading what the teleprompter tells him to. He's a puppet, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't be like JFK. John F. Kennedy, being a youngster and somehow thinking that he was president, just decided to do what he wanted. And across the board, if you look at what their agenda was and what he was doing, he was shutting their agenda down. He wanted to get us out of Vietnam. He wanted to shut the CIA down. It just item after item. He actually printed up U.S. money, doing an end-around run, getting around the Federal Reserve, So item after item, as president, he started to shut them down. Of course, if a president steps up and starts using his power for the people, then you can see what happens to him. He was only able to do it for a short time before he got a bullet through his head. So, yeah, the president could step up and be a John F. Kennedy and not be a puppet, but he wouldn't last long. Yeah, no, definitely. Seems to be the way it is, and Kennedy is a great example that a lot of people use. And some say, presidents are sat down and shown the footage and told, this can happen to you if you don't follow the agenda. Larry gives us a question here, and he asks, and this is a good question, why are the powers that be so intent on getting DNA samples from everybody? Well, I don't know the full extent of the agenda behind that, but I can say some of it. One is it's a control issue. At a certain point in the future, people will be manufactured. They're going to take reproduction away from the common person. They're going to produce people in factories. And so by looking at DNA, they're beginning to get a library, a control of where people have come from, who they are, and that can be used in a number of ways. One is if you're, and backing up and interrupting myself, if you go to prison, you are not allowed out of prison unless you give a DNA sample. So, for instance, they got a DNA sample from me. That's just a requirement if you're incarcerated to be released. They won't release you unless they get that from you. So they will be able to identify exactly who you are, who your heritage is, and that's going to be very helpful to them. One of the things that they have been doing is genealogy work to try to track down where we all came from, and this all relates back to they're control freaks, and you might say, why this much information? Because they're insane, So a part of the answer is just these people are these controllers, which explains part of these other agendas items of their agenda too. Is it's insanity, you know. So will they be able to manipulate our DNA, knowing what we have? That's probably part of it too, because they are into splicing and dicing and doing stuff with genetically modifying the human race, which is just one more reason why this whole thing should terrify people, because the human race as we know it, you know, given these people's agenda, may be altered and totally altered and not even around in 50 years or 100 years. These people aren't God. They don't know what they're doing. They're already genetically modifying life, you know, plants and animals, and who knows where it's all going. Again, it's part of the kingdom of death. Satan doesn't care how God's creation is destroyed, so he allows genetic material this way and that when they have no idea what they're doing. Anyway, that's part of the answer.
Yeah, I'm looking at this DNA issue a little bit from a different perspective. You know, one thing too, we talk about Illuminati and bloodlines. To me, are synonymous, interchangeable almost. In terms of you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And are we looking at a situation here where there's the Illuminati, the Luciferians, the people, the globalists who are psychopaths? I mean, they're wanting to dominate and control everything, but are attempting through Luciferian means to corrupt. I mean, if we go down deeper into this discussion. Is this not
don't let the competition, ruthless competition between different bloodlines, different companies of the Illuminati? That is the way these people work. You know, because they think that the meanest will rise to the top. So the Rockefellers within themselves, within their own family, and the Rockefellers in relationship to the Rothschild, these people are all in competition at one level. But understand, it's just like you might have 2 or 3 brothers that always fight each other, but they will rally around each other if there's an outsider, and so the Illuminati will fight amongst themselves, but when it comes to us, the common people, they're all united. So don't lose track of that just because you see that infighting. There's been a tremendous amount of infighting within the Illuminati, different cliques. There have been the traditionalists with them, the ones that aren't traditionalists, the ones that are full-blooded against the ones that are part-blooded. There's been infighting, but you know, they don't mind that because they believe that it's healthy.
Interesting. So it's theater.
Yeah.
Theater for to distract while things are happening in the background. Very interesting. Gary C. writes in from Florida asking, would you please ask Mr. Springmeier, what type of communication, is there code that we're seeing, Illuminati code? Is there anything, well, let me paraphrase this again. We know that there's Illuminati symbolism, whether it's a handshake or whatever. Is there communication between open communication that we're not, I mean, that we're seeing, but we just don't understand that's taking place? For example, and this is part of my question here. We saw Joe Biden standing in the Oval Office holding a book, a code book, or a classified document with the word code word on it. And if you look at the position of his hands, various things, the photograph seemed to send a message as if perhaps he was read into something. Back to Gary C's question here. Is there open communication right before our very eyes, Illuminati communication, that the average person sees but doesn't really understand?
The answer to that is categorically yes. To give a little bit deeper insight into that is if we go back to their trauma-based mind control where they create multiple personalities that are programmed, they create triggers. And one of those triggers, for instance, where you have the 2 fingers, you know, the little pinky and the index finger that point making the horns, Satan.
Right.
You know, there was even a stamp where they have that. And then you see all the presidents and all of these celebrities doing the satanic sign here. there. But on one level, that's just kind of fun and games. We're showing the horns of Satan or whatever. But on a deeper level, that does something to somebody who's programmed with trauma-based mind control. So there's tremendous amount of triggers that are being communicated openly right in front of us every day that relates to the trauma-based mind control.
And this is a great segue into this question. David from Michigan writes, we saw back in the 1960s the movie The Manchurian Candidate. Okay, and I'll just finish, again, I'll paraphrase this question. The Manchurian Candidate from the 1960s, the movie. What are your thoughts on that in general? I mean, was that pretty accurate in terms of how that trauma-based mind control works? And let me supplement that question too with this. In my research with the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, Sirhan, the polka dot dress girl or young woman that we saw, was that a result of mind control, trauma-based or otherwise?
Yeah, Manchurian Candidate, that movie's good. Telephone with Charles Bronson, another good movie to show the end result of this trauma-based mind control. And yes, on Sirhan, that the way this trauma-based mind control works, indeed.
Very good. Mr. Springmeier, is there anything that you want to cover that we haven't, or anything that you want to talk about that we have not asked yet, or we should hit?
We'll go back to building success into the listeners. When you take the moral high ground, you gain tremendous power. And I have watched people that had the moral high ground and were Christ-like, and specifically one gentleman that I worked with for a long time, and saw him get out of any kind of a situation. It's like he had the key to unlock any kind of a problem by being Christ-like. And so I just encourage people to take the moral high ground because it gives you tremendous power. And I want people to realize that they're the free person. They try to get us into this beat down mentality where they're the masters, but if you don't go with the outward appearances, because they are the ones that are enslaved. They're enslaved to Satan, to drugs, to alcohol, philosophies, blah, blah, blah. And if you've given your life over to Christ, you're the free person. You're the one who's got the freedom to do what's right. And so you're the free person, and don't let them beat you down. There's so much that they do that people allow themselves to the system just ends up beating up on them, and they don't know where to turn. And that's why I say, Christ came to give us life, and sometimes we have to make decisions where we step away from their system, which is just, you can work for a company, invest your life, turn your life over to that company, have no life of your own, and then right before you retire, they pull the rug out from underneath it, and you're left with nothing, So think through your life, think through what's valuable, realize that your family is valuable, realize the kind of values that Christ talked about, and surround your life with things that are meaningful. And that's something that is important. When I was working with people that had been programmed by the Illuminati's total mind control, in order to get them free of the Illuminati, you had to offer them something that was more powerful and better than the Illuminati. The Illuminati has lots of power. How do you show someone like that something better? Well, when you start stepping out in faith in God, you start seeing God do miracles, and you start seeing that there's a power greater than Satan, and you're able to show people that there is a life out there. There's a wonderful life to be had, and that's what I want to hold out to the listeners is step out of the negativity and all of the crud that we're being drowned in, and step out and take control of your life. When I was incarcerated, I found out something that was so true, that if we don't grab a hold of our lives, if we don't grab a hold of our time and use it, that the time will grab a hold of us and just beat us to death. So don't let the world and everything run your life, but take control of things and do the things that will give you, will center your life around positive blessings, and step forward and don't let the world just run you around, run you ragged.
As we bring our show to a close, I just want to say how much we've enjoyed spending time with you at this informal kickback kitchen table type discussion. Again, so many people with so many questions. How can people, if they have specific questions, I don't know if you, of course, can entertain them all, but is there a method of contact via your website, which is pentrax.com, or would you prefer some sort of interaction via Facebook?
They're welcome to go to Facebook. I had to give up on my website because what happened was, I originally did the website thinking that I would interact with my readership through it, but I was getting, it was about one spam every 2 seconds. And the first couple weeks that I had my website up there, I spent like 3 hours a day just deleting the spam. It was not normal. The world order just was a way to vet things, but then that slows down the communication process. And so I found out that Facebook works better. People are welcome to write me on Facebook. I will also give out my email address. It's springmeiermessages@hotmail.com. But understand this is I'm on communication overload, and I don't always get people answered or answered in a timely fashion or give the attention that they want, and people get their feelings hurt. But the reality of it is I'm only one person, and I can only cover so many bases. And so you're welcome to send something, but absolutely do not send me more than 1 or 2 questions. You know, there's some people that will send me 50 or 100 questions. No way, no way. I'm not answering 50 or 100 questions. I have done that in the past, but no more. You know, that's how.
You've got books on your website for sale. Our guests with questions. Go to Fritz's website and order the books. Order his books, and I'm sure by reading those books, you will find the answers to the majority of the questions you have. And now, what's your Facebook presence? Is it just Fritz Springmeier on Facebook?
Yeah, there's 2 sites with my name. It's Fritz Springmeier.
Okay.
It's just under my name. They're just going to have to differentiate. One site was created prior to me creating my own site. They should be able to go on there and read my posts just by they can be a follower.
Okay. Well, that's good. And a lot of people are interfacing via Facebook. Despite what you hear about Facebook, it does serve a purpose to get information out if used properly. And so that's good to know that you're on Facebook, folks. Connect with them via Facebook, Fritz Springmeier, and of course, visit Penn Good Reading. I just want to say that you've been such a gracious guest. With your time and a wealth of information. And thank you for fielding all of those questions. Boy, we went in so many different directions, but that's what people are curious about this. So we really want to thank you very, very much for your time. And as we bring the program to a close, Mr. Springmeier, I just want to say God bless.
Absolutely. We'll have to do it again, sir. And you have a great night. And
he's a legend, actually. Legend out there on the internet. Is author, very prolific author, prolific writer. I would urge everyone to check out his information at pentrax.com, his books via his website, as well as his Facebook posting. So it's extremely it's really great. It is really great that he spent this much time with us. And folks, you can watch his interview too. Is on Alex Jones Infowars.com. Back from January 28th, 2012, Alex Jones had him on, and there you can see he's actually on video. There's about four different segments that you can access on Infowars.com. A literal encyclopedia of rare, unbelievable information referring to his works and publications, but certainly a lot of information conveyed on that interview. Now, before we close out the show, we do have to touch on a few pieces of news that I believe are extremely important.
I think we need to close the show right now, and no news. No, I'm kidding. No. There's so much news
that has taken place. You're looking at unexpected, at least we're led to believe, an unexpected situation take place. He writes, pay attention to the man at the bottom of the screen with the white hair. Now, if you play the C-SPAN video, it's kind of hard to see because the vote tally is in front, the text is in front, so there's a lot of blockage. But watch the actions of this stenographer prior to her getting up and taking the the microphone. John B. writes, it looks like this woman is talking with this gentleman. He says something, and she gets up and goes directly to the podium. Then he appears to send a text to somebody thereafter. It's rather interesting, don't you think? And on a forum earlier, the audio and video were together. Now it's gone. Now you have to find both in different places. Now, that's something that I suppose could be means.
I have not seen the video. I heard the audio.
Right.
But as the chat room is saying, and I do agree that she needs to remain in our prayers.
Well, yeah, of course.
If you see somebody speaking out, I mean, she wasn't a clerk. She was not a assistant to a representative. This was a stenographer. This would be like being in a courtroom and having the court typewriter lady, a stenographer, just getting up and going to the judge's microphone and speaking.
Right, exactly. But this is in the House chamber, and of course, all to the House of Representatives. Well, she was elsewhere. But seriously, could this be? You know, we're all entranced by this young woman's behavior, this woman's behavior, and of course the media is saying that she's crazy. But is that the real explanation? Now, seriously, is that the real explanation? And then watch the video and be carefully watch the video. What are we seeing in this video? And I'm posing that as a question. Are we seeing something perhaps that might not be so readily explained?
And it sounded like the Holy Spirit took her over.
It's my contention that she was the most sane person at that time in those chambers.
Yeah.
But go ahead with your news here.
Another story that was very important, I saw that came out. ATF threatens French-style firing squad for agents who leak secrets.
Yeah, Steve sent this. That was on Steve Quayle's website yesterday.
This from the Washington Times, yeah.
Yeah, and he sent that to us.
For mass shootings, gun control, Second Amendment rights, the Justice Department, a manual for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, complete with a photo of a turn-of-the-century firing squad, was obtained by the Washington Times, a concerned federal law enforcement official, and immediately drew protest from watchdogs who said it showed a lack of sensitivity to gun violence and the continuing hostile environment towards whistleblowers.
Wow.
I mean, firing squads. Why don't just you do what you want and say guillotines? I mean, what's the difference?
Well, yes, and you know, I used to laugh at people who would even bring up, you know, the guillotines, but until I was reminded, of course, there was I was going to say one of the southern states to bring that back as capital punishment. So we're seeing this really crazy, this really dire, this. In my view, this acceleration toward a very unhappy ending here with respect to the ultimate objective of the Illuminatus and the Luciferian agenda, and I think that, and this leads me into the last thing I'll say for the night is this. Tomorrow night, Steve Quayle and Pastor David Langford are coming on the show. Not Sunday night, but tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is going to be a very spiritual show. I was talking with Steve, and he said that he was talking with Pastor David Langford, and together they had a word about if we don't give up our allegiance to Jesus, to God, to our faith. And talking with Steve today, he said, "Look, we're running out of time. There's not that much time left."
And to segue that, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
There's an article going around, Americans ready to kill over Obamacare. It says even though it doesn't officially kick off till the first of the next year, millions of Americans are already at each other's throats over it. Research from the U.S. Census Bureau shows that the country is now more divided than any other time in our history since the Civil War.
And isn't that what, you know, people have mocked and ridiculed my DHS source, uttered the words Civil War. It was the intent, or is the intent, of this regime to divide and conquer, to bring back or to put us in a position where civil war will be it's going to become a reality, and it's going to be just like the first brother against brother, family member against family member, and you're going to have a level of betrayal among family members and neighbors, friends, co-workers like never before seen, and it's all planned in the bowels of. You don't think they're going to use that? Of course they are.
Target practice, I think.
Of course. Yeah, when I went to the range this past week, I used hollow points. No. So, folks, we have to be very careful. So tomorrow night, Pastor David Langford and Steve Quayle talking about the rapid escalation toward the inability for us to engage in commerce. And, of course, that equates to the mark of the beast system. Are we going to be out in the cold, folks? Are we going to be out with
better to be out in the cold with Jesus than to be...
It's really a battle for your soul, for eternal salvation. There is no choice, ladies and gentlemen. You only have one choice. And that is, of course, if you want to have eternal salvation. And I would much rather have eternal salvation than temporary pleasure with or being able to engage in commerce. But that's going to be an interesting show tomorrow. Pastor David Langford and Steve Quayle. In fact, it's on our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com. That's HomelandSecurityUS.com. And please share that with your friends. Let people know about it.
And I hope people will be here to listen. I don't know how many people are going to take the president's words today, and stick with them. How he said we need to stop paying attention to bloggers and media talking heads and radio show hosts and start worrying about how to govern this country.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because the phone rang in our office and it was Valerie Jarrett on the phone saying, "Hey, Obama was talking about you."
60 seconds.
No, obviously I'm just being facetious, but
she's
seriously,
supposed to listen, but she was obeying her own orders. I mean,
I believe, Joe, that the new media difference and they're running scared. Look, I don't know how long. This could be our last show. Tomorrow could be our last show. And that's what Steve said to me today.
Yes,
you just don't know how long we have.
That's why we got to be grateful for what we do have and, always be trying to help one another and grow more on a daily, minute-by-minute basis. With that, we've reached the absolute end of our program. God bless each and every one of you. Until tomorrow night, stay safe.
10 seconds.
See you then.
Good night, everyone.